Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of the Sunday Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're streaming out live on the Alternate Current Radio Network and also on the live streams on X right now, Rumble, YouTube, also on, BitChute, bit of a problem. We'll talk about that later in Overdrive. The online safety bill has come online in the UK, and a lot of websites are pulling down their platforms because they can't keep up with the UK's rigorous censorship and, quote, content moderation scheme. This is a clear end run by the government in Britain to shut down a lot of content on the internet under the guise of online harms, things that could harm people or offend people. It's hard to know which is which these days. Anyway, unfortunately, no live stream on BitChute anymore. We'll see how that situation develops. We're also on Facebook Live right now, as well as on the audio streams after the show, usually on the audio podcasts like iTunes, Spotify, and all those other platforms. I think we'll even have the video program on Spotify as well. So look for that on your subscription downloads. We've got a couple of big stories we're going to be covering today. Of course, we're going to be joined by our team members during the Overdrive segment. I think Hesher, Ruckus, Basil Valentine's going to be joining us as well to comb through some of the biggest stories domestically and internationally from a U.S., European, and international scope. So we'll get right to it. I know a lot of people online are talking about the train wreck that is the Douglas Murray interview with Joe Rogan and Dave Smith. I guess it was a kind of a debate, and never has there been such a glorious meltdown of anybody. The last one I can remember is Kathy Newman on Channel 4 when she interviewed Jordan Peterson. That's kind of like that moment. So Douglas Murray had his Kathy Newman moment this past week, and boy, was it a glorious train wreck. We'll get into some of the details of that in a moment, but let's hit the big story, and this is what we're going to be leading off with. And of course, this discussion is going to spill over into the Overdrive segment here. Peace negotiations or de-escalation or nuclear talks, whatever you want to call it, between the United States and Iran. This began in earnest yesterday. We had a massive Twitter space, big forum, brought on some fantastic guests. We did that on X last night. Here had a very good attendance. We're averaging about 1,000 listeners in the room at any given time, but we went through all the details, at least the initial reports that we had some access to, as to how the negotiations, the opening round of, quote, indirect negotiations. This was held on neutral territory in Oman with representatives from the United States and Iran as well. Oman basically playing the facilitator in this. There's a lot to unpack here, but it's important to realize the tension in the region, especially after what Donald Trump did just last week and sent this threatening letter to the Iranians, basically saying, if you don't come to the table to renegotiate the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA type agreement, the one that Trump himself destroyed in May of 2018, if you don't come back to the table, then we're going to basically do a preemptive strike and take out your leadership, take out your civilian nuclear power plants. I mean, Israel is demanding that Iran allow U.S. or the Israelis or something to blow up all of their civilian nuclear facilities, enrichment facilities, etc. They're calling this the Libya solution. How did that work out for Libya, by the way? Libya is not there anymore. Country's gone. So the lesson from Libya is if you comply with this level of threat, the West, Israel, NATO, whoever, they're going to come for you anyway. So the Iranians are not dumb. I mean, you don't get to be a 5,000-year-old civilization like Persia without learning a thing or two from history. And of course, they've learned that they have to prioritize their national sovereignty above compliance with Western diktats, especially when they're coming from somebody like Donald Trump. And Donald Trump sent his chief envoy. That's the guy there on your left-hand side. His name's Steve Witkoff. And, you know, as rich as these guys are, I always point out they have so much money, but they can't actually afford to get a suit that actually fits. I mean, look at Steve Witkoff. It's embarrassing. So you'd think they'd have a tailor somewhere in Manhattan. I mean, these guys could afford to fly to London and get fitted up in Savile Row and be back, before dinner in Manhattan. I mean, that's how wealthy these guys are, but they can't dress themselves. Donald's not much better, as you can see, with the hat on. But let's dispense with the jokes and poking fun at these men. The point is, what were they trying to achieve here with the Iranians? And they've sent their forward team here, Steve Witkoff, who is not Secretary of State. He's not, quote, an official diplomat. He's sort of like Trump's warm-up guy, okay? I call him a meter and greeter, basically. So, like, if you go to a casino, the guy who is repping the owner of the casino, like Steve Wynn's guy on the door in Vegas or whatnot, that's, he's the sort of right hand, if you will, at least the front of house right man of the boss. That's kind of like what Steve Witkoff is playing that role. He's a very nice guy, very personable. We saw his interview with Tucker Carlson. Very nice guy. But, does he have the skill set, a diplomatic skill set that's necessary to put together complex deals? The Iran situation is one of the most important geopolitical situations really in the world right now. So, I mean, this is high stakes geopolitics. Millions and millions of lives are at stake. And do they have any qualified diplomats on the Trump team? Okay, doing property deals, and I've said this before on previous interviews, doing property deals in Manhattan or the tri-state area, putting up a casino in Atlantic City, this is not like international relations. If you notice, everything Trump does is about taking the leverage, using that leverage to push the other party into a corner before you begin negotiations. Okay. And people say, oh, this is the art of the deal. Haven't you read Donald's book? That might be good for like making money in property, dealing with Teamsters, dealing with corrupt city officials that you have to bribe to get planning permission, and dealing with the unions and all that. Okay, fine. That's great. International relations is not like that. Okay. You can't go in throwing your weight around and expecting the other side to somehow comply with your demands or even meet you halfway. The other side normally will say, we're not going to meet until you come with a little bit of humility and we'll meet in the middle. This is how you do diplomacy. Okay. Donald Trump, I don't even get into the tariff thing. We can talk about that maybe in the overdrive. That was a big L, by the way, for Trump. Massive L for Trump. Okay. China. He threw these did a tit for tat tariff war, then suddenly lifts tariffs after, said, oh, we're going to suspend it, as I predicted on X. I said Trump is going to do a 90-day or a pause. He's going to, because all his donors are going to be upset because their long positions are going to be hit on the stock market. And of course, that's what happened. So he drops tariffs down to what, flat 10%. And then, but China, he leaves it on. Then the Chinese reciprocate. They say, no, we're not going to budge. Then Trump goes, I'm going to punish you, 125% tariff. And then Japan comes back and says, 130. And then Trump says 145. It's just ridiculous. Okay. He started an economic war with one of the most powerful economy in the world, China. And if you know anything about negotiations in Asia, the first thing you're taught when you're learning about business or international relations, when you're dealing with the Chinese or anybody in Asia, okay, what's important in Asia is you allow the other side, even if you have a disagreement, you allow them to save face. Okay, you do not want to have the other side lose face, because this is a bad place to be if you're negotiating with Chinese or Japanese. Okay, what does Trump do? He causes them to lose face before they even start negotiations. You're not going to go very far with the Chinese. I mean, that's just basic 101 stuff. I read that just by reading, Richard Nixon's memoirs and the types of people that he had, professionals doing these sort of international shuttle diplomatic missions. Okay, Trump doesn't have anybody, it seems, that's qualified or able to do any of these basic things. So what happened? China didn't blink. Trump blinked. And then all of a sudden, they're lifting tariffs on all these essential high sales Chinese consumer goods, electronics. So art of the deal? I don't think so. I personally, I think it's art of the I don't know what the hell I'm doing. That's the title of his next book. So the other thing with Trump is, and not to get off on a tangent here, but it is kind of central. If you took a business course, okay, let's say you went to, let me think of a high profile business school. Let me think. How about Trump University? If you went to Trump University, the Business 101 class, golden rules in business. Donald should be able to tell you this or not. Golden rule is never overpromise and underdeliver. Okay? Cardinal sin in business. Same in politics, especially in politics. Okay? Don't overpromise and underdeliver. Okay? If you're the art of the deal, the master of the art of the deal, you should be able to at least grasp that basic concept. Okay? Don't overpromise and underdeliver. What has Trump done before he even got into office? I'm going to end the Ukraine war in 24 hours. Okay. Theoretically, that's possible if you know what you're doing. And if you don't cave to Zelensky and to the war lobby. And basically, he should have said, I'm cutting off weapons and then we're going to sign a peace deal. And all of a sudden, the media machine and the Eurocrats, everybody, the Ukrainian lobby, everybody just piled in and he caved. So guess what? There's no deal in Ukraine. It's status quo. The U.S. is supplying weapons and pumping money into that conflict as well. Russia's saying, well, if that's the way it's going to be, we're going to carry on because we need to secure our national security priorities. So here we are. He had an opportunity, Trump, to go in and do something productive, bring the conflict to some kind of negotiated settlement and save lives. I bought into that sales pitch. Many did. That's why many people voted for Trump, just on that single issue. And he's got another big L. Okay. Donald, you're racking up L's. You remember when he campaigned, he says, we're going to win so much, you're going to get tired of winning. We're going to win beautifully and we're going to win bigly. Okay. I see no W's. I see L's. L in Ukraine, Gaza ceasefire. Steve Witkoff, the genius. Where are we on the Gaza ceasefire? No ceasefire. Israel is basically carpet bombing refugee camps with tents, with U.S. bombs. So another big L. Another L. Tariff wars. Is that a W? I don't think so. Stock market crash, trillions of dollars wiped off the market in terms of market cap globally. A recession is certainly coming into view now. Inflation, stagnation in terms of economy, stagflation. Tell me where stagflation is a W. That's a big L. So even on the economy, the thing that Donald Trump is supposed to be some type of, savant stroke sage on all things to do with money, the only people getting rich or doing well are him and his billionaire friends. I'm sorry to point it out. They even boasted about it. Charles Schwab in the White House with Trump, boasting about how much money that they all basically raked in doing short positions when the market was crashing last week. A crash that was induced by Donald Trump's own policy. They all had advanced knowledge of it. These guys were shorting the market from February. They knew this was coming. All these people that are connected enough that have the resources made out like bandits. What about the working people? What about normal folk? Normal folk saw 20 to 30% of the value of their retirement savings or their 401k wiped off the map. So how does that make America great? It makes you guys great. You're doing well. These guys are doing extremely well. They're doing great. Everybody else is doing really lousy. Okay. The idea, and now we're getting to the point. The idea that Donald Trump is somehow representing the working class is fast becoming one of the biggest con jobs in the history of politics. This is classic late stage empire. Okay. This is the best America has to offer. And don't say that, Joe, you think Biden was better? That's a very low bar you're setting up there. Okay, comparing anything to Joe Biden is a joke. Okay, Biden himself was a joke. So to be better than Biden, you could put your pet cat up for president and probably be more popular than Biden. At least the approval rating would be higher. Probably the performance would be better on many levels as well. At least there'd be a pacifying effect. Donald Trump is like a disaster so far, and I know people are going to say, "Oh, you're just a Trump." Listen, I was defending Trump from 2015 when everybody was attacking him to give him a fair shot. Yet he was saying all the right things. He wanted to shake up the system, wanted to be a change agent. I can support a populist candidate. If it's on the Democratic side, probably going to have to be a little more centrist. But a lot of us gave Trump a chance, and here he came in the second term, made some big promises, and I don't see anything being delivered. A lot of hype, and the billionaire class, Elon, they're doing great. So the Iran talks, where is this heading? Another L. What is the first thing they said? Donald Trump said, "Oh, we want to have direct talks with the Iranians." And the Iranians said, "No, we are not having direct talks with you, Mr. Trump and your team." And guess what? Trump caves. Another L. Trump caves, and then Trump says, "We're going to decide the location of the negotiations, these indirect negotiations." And Iran said, "No, you're not. We're having them in Oman, in the Emirate of Oman, just on the lower rim of the Persian Gulf." Why? Because they have a very good relationship with the Omanis. And guess what? The talks were in Oman. Another L. 0 for 2. So I think that in a way this was good because it brought the U.S. to an initial consultation, let's call it. What they didn't really negotiate anything. They talked about the nuclear issue. Okay, the whole issue of the Iranian proxies, Yemen, and this wasn't, to my knowledge, it wasn't discussed. Okay, it was really about the nuclear issue and also about I would think the discussion on sanctions probably would have come up as part of that. Okay, because the last nuclear deal, they gave Iran sanctions relief, and they started trading with Europe, with the United States. And Israel went completely mental and pushed the Trump administration hard in May 2018 to back out of this deal that Obama signed. And again, I have to caveat this so people don't think I'm a partisan. I'm not a Democrat. Okay, sorry, not. Haven't voted Democrat for a long time. Okay, but one of the most useful things that Obama did, very few useful things internationally, he was a disaster from a foreign policy point of view. He started about 6 new wars, a peace president. But one of the most useful things he did was the Iran nuclear deal. Took 2 years to negotiate, 2 years, 20 months, from November 2014 to July of 2015, 20 months. And the lead envoy on that was the U.S. Secretary of State, who at the time was John Kerry. Okay. Notice that Marco Rubio is nowhere near this for Trump. What does that tell us? One, Rubio is a complete lightweight. He's absolutely useless. He was picked because he would be subservient to Trump. Trump doesn't want anybody that will exert any independence or throw any weight around, or no one of substance. Okay, they always have to be second tier. Look at how he selects his cabinet. Okay, now Witkoff is his old fixer and his old buddy from Manhattan. Okay, trusted pair of hands for Trump Incorporated. So he's the forward envoy. He's become the Secretary of State effectively, at least on the negotiation side. Okay, so no Rubio. We've got Witkoff and a few other various and sundry people who are effectively advocating normally on behalf of the state of Israel. Okay, that's kind of what it is. So, and what have they got from Iran on this? They probably got an understanding that they can move forward with talks, and that's it. So they will schedule a series of meetings starting next Saturday. And I think personally, I think the Iranians pulled a blinder here. Okay. With all these threats, forward threats, the U.S. putting their B-52 bombers and their B-2 bombers at Diego Garcia, long-range bombers, all of their naval assets being positioned. So it looks like they're preparing for a war with Iran. Okay. And Iran, by engaging the U.S., what you have to understand is this, okay? A lot of people talk about Trump, his crypto genius schemes that he looks like he doesn't know what he's doing, but it's really 5D chess, okay? Or 6 million D chess, okay? He's a genius. He's got it all figured out. Trust the plan, okay? QAnon mentality, QAnon mode. Donald Trump is not a chess player, okay? Donald Trump plays checkers, okay? Power checkers. Who invented the game of chess? Let me think. Is it the Arabs or the Persians? Who's really good at it? Russia. But the Iranians are master chess players. You see, because the time horizon on their game is probably a couple of hundred years. Okay, they're a civilizational state. The great civilizational states on this planet, we're talking about a state, a culture that's wrapped around a civilization. China, good example. I will even put Japan in that category just because there's just some very unique and special characteristics of Japanese culture and society. I mean, we could say that about a lot of Asian countries if you really want to drill down into it, even Korea. Okay, but very much expressed in Japanese in all aspects of their culture, political life, literature, poetry, art. Japan is a civilizational state, small one. China is a large, successful civilizational state that goes back thousands of years, 6,000 plus years. Okay, that's what you're dealing with China, the brain of an elephant, long-term memory culturally. India is a civilizational state. India, okay, great civilization. If we want to go back to pre-Sanskrit or early Sanskrit Vedic Indus Valley, 6, 7, 10, 12,000 years. I don't know. Who knows? Persia, 5 to 6,000 years. Those are civilizational states. Russia has become a civilizational state with very defined characteristics in terms of language and culture, religion as well. And there's other civilizational states that we could throw in there. America is not one of them. Okay. So America is very short term in their thinking because it's a very young country. And that's reflected in the attitudes and the rhetoric that you're hearing from people like Trump, but not only Trump, but he just is the most extreme example of it. Okay. So Iran's pulled a blinder. They've drawn the U.S. into negotiations. As long as they keep them in negotiations, Iran is safe. Okay, and I'll even say that they, well, in the Middle East, they play backgammon and not checkers and chess. And backgammon is a wild game. And backgammon is a game of risks as well. If you gamble and you play backgammon for money, you've got balls of steel, basically. So what Iran's doing is a combination of backgammon and chess on the United States. The same with Russia. They've engaged the U.S. into some kind of negotiation process. Trump doesn't know what he's doing. Russia's taking advantage of it and saying, well, you clearly don't know what you're doing. Steve Witkoff couldn't even name the territories in Donbass. He couldn't even name the new regions that are part of the Russian Federation, like Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporozhye, Kherson. He had no idea. He said, "Oh, the provinces or whatever." So he's not fussed with the details. Hasn't done his homework. and that guy's in charge of negotiations. I mean, it's kind of bizarre if you think about it. So that's where things are at. I think the U.S. privately is probably on a very, again, like Ukraine and Russia, on a very steep learning curve. They're way behind the Iranians. Okay, all they know about Iran is what the Israeli lobby has told them on a talking points memo that arrives at their desk in Washington, D.C. every morning, which tells them what to say, how to say it, if anything to do with Palestine, Israel, Iran, or the Middle East. Okay, most congressmen and senators are as dumb as a box of rocks. And I can tell you that 100% certainty. They don't know anything about anything. They're completely reliant on whatever their aides put it in front of them. And who's giving their aides the talking points memo? It's coming from J Street. It's coming from IPAC or the bevy of other Israeli lobby or think tanks like the Heritage Foundation, okay? Neocon think tanks. That's where they get their worldview from. So when they enter into negotiations on serious stuff like nuclear nonproliferation or preventing World War III, they really don't know what they're doing. They don't know where they are. They don't understand the geography. It's very simple. In previous administrations, okay, like Richard Nixon, Jimmy Carter, John F. Kennedy, and we've spoke to people who worked in those administrations. We've interviewed them, okay? The types of diplomats and intelligence briefings they get, that their forward guy, or their James Kennan, or their Caspar Weinberger, or their Cyrus Vance, Henry Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski. These people know the history from the beginning of the inception of that country. They will go into the Iranian negotiations knowing the entire history of Iran, the history of all of the neighboring countries. They will know the date they were independent, what revolutions happened, what the current sort of foreign policy portfolio looks like, past conflicts, battlefield analysis of past conflicts. They will know, in short, everything that leads up to that moment. Okay. And they would have studied the previous Iran nuclear deal meticulously. Know every single loophole, every single in and out, totally fluent and conversant. Why? Because the Iranians are going to be at that level. And so if you can't meet the level they're at, how are you going to negotiate or know if it was a good deal or a bad deal or understand the ins and outs of it? You won't be able to actually have any real meaningful discussions. You'll be in over your head, and you'll have to go say, oh, time out, let's meet again, go back and hire some people or bring in people to explain what actually has been said, and then go back and look at the agreement that you've been saying was a bad deal for the last 7 years when you didn't even read it to begin with. Okay, that's kind of where we're at with the Trump administration. So it's very worrying that, and I don't believe for a second that they're just playing stupid in public and that there's some master plan behind the scenes. No, this is not happening. Okay. You would have seen some kind of articulate explanation by now, and there's been nothing. Okay. All we've seen is like ignorant statements, mad tweets, like rants on True Social, doing policy by social media. It's embarrassing. But that's kind of where we're at, folks. How can you support this if you're a conservative, or if you voted for Trump because he was the peace candidate? Okay. He has started a war in Yemen, losing war. He is threatening to start a war with Iran. He is supplying weapons and bombs for Israel to slaughter tens of thousands of Palestinians. They're killing. They just bombed a hospital yesterday, the Baptist hospital. Why on earth would you be using F-35s, stealth fighters, to destroy hospitals? The last operational hospital in Gaza. Unless your goal was to wipe out the population and force everybody living there to force them out of the area so that you can redevelop it and turn it into Dubai, because that's the plan that's being articulated right now in Israel and in Washington. So forced ethnic cleansing under threat of death. When has that ever been acceptable? But that's the policy. Trump's even explicitly saying this. Oh, they're going to have to move. It's terrible. There's so much death in Gaza. Oh my goodness, Oh, this is they can't live there. It's just not. It's not good living conditions, says Trump. How did it get that way, Donald? How did it get that way? Did you have something to do with it? Did your country, your government? Don't blame it on Biden, okay? Because all those bombs have an American flag on them. It doesn't say Biden on them. It says made in the USA. So like own it. Take responsibility. This is also one of the problems with US politics. It's become so partisan and polarized that nobody wants to take responsibility as a country, as a government, for what the last government or administration did. And that's the correct thing to do. If you're transgressed by another country, you're not going to sort of give the next government a free pass because they're, a different government. Like it's ridiculous. Trump has broken and backpedaled and flipped and pivoted on every single negotiations. He is personally responsible for destroying the original Iran nuclear deal that was working perfectly fine. And Israel said, tear it up in 2018. And he did. And that's why we're in the position that we're in. So I think if Trump continues to employ the Kubler-Ross grief model for this NLP negotiations tactic, it's a cheap sales tactic, which he does, which is threaten the other side, make people angry, and then start bargaining from there, and push the other side to think they have limited options, and get them to accept a lower sort of position. Okay, this is what he's trying to do with foreign policy, and everyone's saying, "Oh, it's art of the deal: escalate to de-escalate, peace through strength." Okay, no. If you study international relations, you study diplomacy long enough, you will find that this is the path to failure, and worse, it's the path to war. This is exactly how World War I started. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, after the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, okay, the Austro-Hungarian Empire put huge demands on Serbia, huge demands. 1914, huge demands. And there were demands that were almost impossible to meet, okay? And they said, if you don't accept or, comply with all of these specific demands, I think there were 10 things that they were compelling the Serbians to do at the time. And Serbia complied with all of them except for one. And Austro-Hungarian Empire said, nope, that's not good enough. We're going to war. And in the headlines, Austria-Hungary chooses war. And everybody else piles in. We have one of the worst human disasters in history. One of the worst, most wasteful wars. And then the aftermath of World War I gave us the map of the Middle East, gave us Nazi Germany, and gave us the abject horror and absolute disaster that was World War II. Okay, and that all came from this lack of ability to engage in diplomacy. So what did we do? We constructed the United Nations after the Second World War. We did all these. We had passed the Genocide Convention. Everybody ratified it. Geneva Convention against war crimes. Everybody said, we're on board with that. Other institutions came on. International Criminal Court, which I don't like so much. I have my own criticisms of that. Nonetheless, the intention on paper, at least, is okay, acceptable. WTO, World Trade Organization. All of these different, so many institutions, organizations. It was designed to try to harmonize the international system. And for a while, a lot of aspects of it were very successful and lifted many, many people out of poverty and created what I think very much peace and stability in many parts of the world that the United States wasn't bombing. Okay. Those areas which the US was not bombing or attacking were doing pretty good. And what's the United States done? What's Trump done? It's withdrawn from all of them, as well as all of the missile and arms control agreements with the former Soviet Union and Russia. That's why the conflict in Ukraine is more dangerous, because there are no safety valves like the ABM anti-ballistic missile treaty, like the intermediate nuclear forces INF treaty, like all of these treaties were basically there to provide some kind of a safety valve, a backstop, to make sure that things do not careen out of control. And they've all been destroyed, lifted, they've withdrawn from, sabotaged them. The Minsk Peace Accords, that was ratified by the United Nations Security Council in 2015. US, Britain, France, everybody signed, Russia, China, everyone unanimously signed. That was the peace process to avoid a war in Ukraine. And guess what? The US, the French, and the Germans sabotaged it intentionally to give time for NATO to arm the Ukrainian armed forces up to, quote, NATO standard from 2015. They were preparing for a war that they wanted, okay? NATO, the West, wanted that war to happen. They did everything humanly possible to make it happen, and to hell with the United Nations Security Council. All could have been avoided. So we're seeing this pattern repeating. That's another L for America, really. It's just another one. So if the Iranians, or the Russians for that matter, but the Iranians are looking at all these lapsed agreements, sabotaged agreements, lies, backpedaling, betrayals by America, why would you want to sign anything with the United States, especially with Trump? The record is very bad. Okay. Doesn't make any sense for them. So they're going to, well, we're going to hold out. They're going to attack us anyway. So we might as well stay sovereign and take our chances and maybe buy time to, negotiate and develop some kind of pact with our allies. Makes perfect sense. What the US is doing 7,000 miles across the world trying to start a war does not make sense. Okay. And we know they're doing it on behalf of the state of Israel and the Israeli lobby, but this still doesn't make sense. It's definitely not in America's interest. And quite frankly, it's not in the Israelis' interest either. It's not, because Iran's proved twice they can reach out and touch Israel. Last April and again in October with 2 missile attacks. And they were light. As the Iranians stated, they're sending a message to Israel. The next time, they're going to be much heavier. And what's going to become of the state of Israel after that? Who knows? But do you want to take the chance and find out? Certainly wouldn't be a wise path to take. But, we're dealing with crazy people, completely insane people. So anyway, the tariff wars, a complete joke so far, a complete loss. It's done a lot of damage to the economy. What more can we say? And as far as the Iran deal goes, Witkoff, not impressed. Witkoff is 0 for 2. He's about to go 0 for 3. Trump's 0 for 3 as well. They're going to be 0 for 4 by the summer when the Yemen thing collapses. I mean, if the Republicans lose the midterms and the Democrats had a spine, they'd impeach him for an undeclared war of aggression without going through Congress. But hell will freeze over before the Democrats ever invoke the Constitution when it comes to the War Powers Act of the U.S. federal government. But that's another debate. That's another story. Look, we don't have time to get to the Douglas Murray thing, but we'll probably have a little bit of a chuckle probably in overdrive with our colleagues Hesher, Ruckus, Basil Valentine will also join us. So I'm going to save the Murray clips. This should be a fun roasting of, and no one deserves it more than, if anybody's more deserving of a roasting Nobody is more deserving than Douglas Murray. Nobody deserves it. And just again, we did a Twitter space last night, very well attended. Ibrahim Majid, who was my guest on the Midweek Wire from Beirut, he was my co-pilot on that space. So that was pretty long. I think we probably went about 5 hours, just over 5 hours, had all kinds of panel speakers up. The discussion was interesting. Big economic component in there as well, with Simon Dixon, one of the top Bitcoiners and cryptocurrency advocates in Britain. He joined us as well. So that was a very interesting discussion. So do check us out on Spaces. That's up on my feed. Just scroll down and you'll see the rest of that. So we're going to take a break right now. When we come back into Overdrive, we will be joined by our team members. So be looking forward to what they have to say. In the meantime, is the music of Joseph Arthur. Be back in just a few. Stay with us.